Okay, team, let's go ahead and get started. Today's session is Marketing Insights for AEC Leaders. Our guests are here to present recent market research, and they're going to unveil some critical insights into market trends and challenges. They're going to highlight some key obstacles and provide some actionable recommendations for you guys to consider in your marketing strategy. Now, I'm your moderator, Derek Croson, and although I have a passion for the AEC industry, I've brought two esteemed experts for our time in our session today. The first is Dave Burstein, Director and Senior Consultant at PSMJ, as well as Jason Janicki, the CEO of OpenAsset. Now, I'm going to give them their 5 minutes of fame. It might be a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but first, I want to focus on the key areas for today. So we're going to talk about, helping you guys understand the recent economic developments, and that includes the effects that COVID has had on our industry, and it's permanently reshaped some of those. And we'll talk about what that means for your business. Again, we'll talk about those challenges and those strategies. We'll examine the long-term prospects for the AEC industry and focus both on the public and the private sector markets. And then we're going to make sure that you guys understand how to use data effectively to thrive in a competitive environment and ultimately prepare for your future growth. Now, we will save time for Q&A. And on that note, there is an icon next to the chat at the bottom of your screen. So not chat, but let's use Q&A. Please submit your questions there. I'm going to be filtering those and sending them over to Jason and Dave when we get to Q&A. I'll try to find the most difficult ones so we can stump them. But first things first, we've already got one question. My favorite question, is there going to be a recording and will we get a copy of the slides? Yes, you will. So we've got that one out of the way, and now I'm going to kick it over to Jason to get things started.
Awesome. Thank you, Derek. Hey, I'm Jason Janicki, CEO of OpenAsset. Excited to be here today. I am based out of our New York City office. We actually have offices in London and New York, and folks all over, including Derek over in Utah. Bit of background on OpenAsset. OpenAsset's the only digital asset management platform built exclusively for the AEC. We've been around for about 20 years. We have about 900 AEC clients using OpenAsset worldwide. It's different from other DAMs as it's project, proposal, resume based. And it helps you centralize your assets, speed up proposals, and hopefully win more business. So it also integrates with loads of AEC specific tools and workflows. And we have a passion for working hard to get you onboarded and offering top line support to make sure our customers are set up for success. So yeah, I'm excited to be here today. Excited to chat with Dave at PSMJ about both AEC market trends and also the challenges facing AEC marketers, which is really, really important to us at OpenAsset and hopefully to you out there. So with that, I'll hand it over to Dave.
Thank you very much. And just a little bit about PSMJ. Well, first of all, I guess just a little bit about me. I'm Dave Burstein. I'm senior principal with PSMJ. Spent the first half of my career with Parsons Corporation. Started there as a junior engineer out of grad school, ended up as president of their environmental and planning subsidiaries. Joined the second half. I've been with PSMJ now, and senior principal with them. And these just some of the things that we do at PSMJ. Our number one activity is project management and project management training. We train more project managers in this industry than everybody else combined. So that's definitely number one. But we also do a lot of stuff on business development. I'm going to be talking about that today. I'll give you some insights based on our research and financial management, all these other things. We really do extensively. We are exclusive to the AEC industry. The C part is mostly construction management, but some construction service as well. So the first thing I want to talk about is some observations that we've had since COVID. And some things changed during COVID and they kind of changed back. But there's some things that have changed that have not changed back and are not going to change back. And so I really wanted to talk about some of those things and how they're affecting you in the AEC industry. So on the positive side, As a result of the shutdown of the economy, the government spent literally trillions of dollars, not just billions, but trillions with a T, to juice up the economy. And that included the IIJA and the IRA and some other initials, the CHIPS Act and so on. Basically, it was for infrastructure projects, mostly public sector infrastructure projects, transportation, water, power, schools, seem to be the biggest ones, and there's some other ones as well. So the good news is that that money has really, really juiced up that portion of the AEC industry, but it also generated a lot of inflation. And as a result of that, the Fed decided that they needed to put brakes on the economy, and so they raised interest rates from the 2s up to the 7s, typically, in terms of mortgage rates. And they really affected, in a negative way, some projects that were for clients that are very sensitive to interest rates, things like developers, clients like developers, and other clients that are sensitive to interest rates, more on the private sector side. So you had a positive effect on the public sector, negative on the private. So because of that, growth in our industry has not been uniform. If you look at engineering firms, you can see the dip there where COVID hit in spring of 2020, but then it recovered and in fact just went right along growing up until the most recent data that we've got from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You can see that engineering firms, which tend to be predominantly in the sectors that were financed by the government and all these trillions of dollars, you can see they're doing very well. On the other hand, architecture firms, not so much. Now, there's some exceptions. The most notable exception is architects that are doing K through 12 and even higher education. Architects in the education market and the healthcare market too are still doing pretty well, but architects that are working for developers and other interest rate sensitive clients, not so much. People are not building office buildings. I'll show you some more data later, but basically you can see that growth kind of peaked about a year ago. And since then, it's actually been on a slight decline for architecture firms. Hourly earnings have also changed. Going back before COVID, you could see that the slope of that line was a lot shallower than the slope of the line since COVID. And you can see that we were getting, relatively modest increases in earnings, and they've really accelerated and continue to accelerate. However, it looks like that might be easing. Right after COVID, you can see there was actually a dip in total compensation for all. This is all professionals, including all A and E firms. But that seemed to peak again about a year ago, and since then it's been coming down. And so traditionally, what we've seen in our industry is typically 2 to 3% per year increases in compensation and salary. Now it looks like it's kind of leveling off at around 4%. So even though it's starting to come back down, I think for the foreseeable future, we're not going to see increases as low as what they had been pre-COVID. What we saw pre-COVID was typically look like this. And I just picked the 4 years before COVID and looked at architects separately from engineers here, but the picture is pretty much the same. Up until about 10 to 14 years of experience, the amount of increase, the percentage increases per year were pretty steady. But then once you got to the 10 to 14 years, or especially the 15 and 19, then it really dropped off. In the 20 plus, and that was, we've seen this traditionally, and that's because obviously the people with 20 years experience or more get higher salaries, so a smaller percent increase is still a fairly significant dollar increase in their salaries. And so we typically saw a pattern that was like this, a drop off when you get to the higher experience levels. That's changed. And what we're seeing now is that in the 20-year plus category, they're actually at the higher end. In fact, for engineers, I just put civil engineers here. For civil engineers, the percentage increase has actually gone up. And so what that's showing here is a real demographic shift. When I go around the country and talk to people in A&E firms, principals in A&E firms, we do strategic planning and other things for them. They keep saying the same thing. We just can't find mid-level and senior level people. And the reason is because the senior level people are retiring and the mid-level people aren't there because they bailed out during the 2009 recession. And so that part of the labor force, the 15 plus years of experience now, has become very sought after, and that's pushed salaries up. So this is a real change from the traditional model that's on the left side of the screen. We also see that there's kind of a dip in compensation for all levels, really. I just went ahead and picked the mid-level, but I picked mid-level civil engineers, but really the picture is pretty similar for most of engineers and architects, where we're seeing that the mid-sized firms are actually paying less compensation than either the small firms or the large firms. And this is a little bit different. Again, we did not see this kind of a pattern pre-COVID. The other thing we see is the inverse of this curve when we look at employee turnover. We see that the mid-sized firms are having the highest employee turnover, where traditionally that was not the case. Traditionally, it was always the large firms that had the highest turnover. So again, this is a major change. And it used to be that you could count on the big firm, the mega firms having a 20% per year turnover. Now it's way down. In fact, in our latest survey, firms over 500 employees had the lowest turnover. Another interesting change is pre-COVID, we saw the biggest increases in management compensation going to managers with a technical background, engineers, architects, scientists, planners, etc. We're not seeing that now. We're actually seeing the biggest increases going to management positions that have a non-technical background. In fact, the biggest one is director of marketing. So if there's some director of marketing folks on the line, I'm sure you're pleased to see this. Jason, you probably
No, this one's really, really interesting. And seeing that increased investment and typically considered kind of overhead folks, especially in the director of marketing, definitely it seems to make some sense here. There's marketing teams that are trying to get loads and loads of proposals out. It's super competitive out there right now. So trying to lock in that top talent that leads these teams would make some sense. It's interesting, and we'll get to some of the data later. What we do not see is marketing teams necessarily growing. So maybe there is the investment here on these management on the marketing side, but we're not necessarily seeing increases in headcount or staff overall on the marketing side.
So the other thing we looked at is how does firm size come to play here? And it comes to play a lot. I just picked HR directors here, but again, this picture is pretty similar for all of the positions that were on the previous slide. And you can see what a difference in compensation between the small firms, the mid-sized firms, and the large firms. I mean, you got the small firms where there's total compensation of a median of under $100,000 a year. 2.5 times that for the firms over 500 people. And so what we're seeing is for these management positions with non-technical backgrounds, like HR directors, like business development directors or marketing directors, those people are being very, very valued by the larger firms. And I think if you're in one of the small or mid-sized firms, you really need to be paying attention to this, because it's going to make it hard for you to keep your people in those management positions when the larger firms are paying a lot more. We're also seeing the effect of retirements of the baby boomers. If you look over the last 10 years, what we've seen about a 2.5-year drop in the median age of all employees in A&E firms. That may not seem like much, but that's a real major factor, and I'm going to show you the result of that in just a minute. The other thing we're seeing as a result of COVID is we're seeing a lot of firms moving their work away from some high wage areas like Boston to relatively nearby lower wage areas like Worcester. And I just picked these two kind of at random, but this picture is all over the country. We're seeing the same phenomenon. Boston having, by the way, the A&E wage index is something that's collected by the Bureau of Labor Statistics every year. And when we looked at their most recent one, what they're saying is that the wages of A&E firms in Boston are 17% above the national average. Worcester, on the other hand, is just a smidge above the national average. So if you do a little calculation, if you can get the same fee, and instead of doing the work in Boston, you do it in Worcester, instead of generating a 3.0 multiplier, you're generating a 3.4 multiplier. Run the numbers, that means doubling your profit. So if a firm in Boston can move its work to Worcester, it can double its profit. So we're seeing this play out over and over throughout the whole country. Those two factors, surprisingly, have actually created a drop in direct labor rates. If you look at direct labor, the median direct labor rate per hour, in spite of these big increases that we've been getting that I showed before, the median direct labor rate has actually dropped by about $2 an hour, which is huge. What that's done is it's really changed our whole profitability model. And there's an equation that we like to use. Profitability of just about every firm is a function primarily of two factors: utilization of the people and the direct labor multiplier achieved on the projects. And if you multiply those two together, you get a number called revenue factor. And profitability tends to be very much a function of revenue factor. So if you look at those two components, let's start with labor utilization rate. Well, what's happened to that in the last 30 years is there's been ups and there's been downs. You know, the economy affects it a lot. For example, in 2009, during the recession, it took a big drop. During the recovery, it went back up and so on. But the long-term trend has been downward. And that's primarily a function of technology replacing people. Back in the day when there was drafting boards and drafting rooms and drafting personnel, back in those days, you had a whole bunch of people charging 40 hours or more jobs week in, week out. That kept utilization high. Today, that has been largely replaced by engineers, surveyors, architects, planners, scientists doing their own drafting work. And so that source of direct labor is gone. It's been replaced by a bunch of overhead people now called the IT department. Back in 1994, there was no such thing as an IT department. Nobody even knew what that was. Well, today, it's a big source of overhead. So I think primarily a result of those two things, we're seeing a long-term drop in labor utilization. I expect that to continue. As technology marches forward, I think we're going to continue to see that drop. So what does that mean? Does that mean that profitability is going to go down if it's a function largely of utilization? Well, yes, unless direct labor multiplier goes up. And here's the good news. It's gone up a lot. Going back 30 years, it was less than 2.8. Now it's up to 3.3. And so that is a huge increase. So you take the combination of those two factors, and in fact, direct labor multiplier increases have more than made up for the decreases in utilization rate. And that's changed some key metrics. A lot of firms look at revenue per employee, and that's I guess that's the brown curve or the orange curve, whatever color it shows up. And you can see that's gone up modestly since 2010. It's gone from about $150,000 to about $170,000. So kind of gone up with inflation. But look what's happened on profit per employee. That's gone up from about $8,000 to about $33,000. It has like tripled or quadrupled. And so I think this is changing one of the key metrics. We used to look hard at revenue per staff. That's no longer one of our key metrics. In fact, we have a basket of 13 metrics that we use to judge our circle of excellence, where we pick the best performing firms every year. We've replaced revenue per staff with profit per staff. which is a much more meaningful metric, and you can see there's huge differences in these two. All right, well, at this point, Jason, I think I'm going to turn it over. Oh, wait, no, I have some more market trends, and then I'll turn it over to you. So let me talk about market trends. So far, we've just talked about where we are today. Let's talk about where we're going. And the best way to look at that is to look at proposal opportunities. When firms are increasing their proposal opportunities, a few months later, the backlog's going to increase. A few months after that, revenues going to increase. A few months after that, cash flow is going to increase for AE firms. Construction firms a little bit behind, but basically proposal opportunities are going to give you a 1 to 2 year window in terms of what's going to happen financially to your company. So let's take a look at that. Every quarter since 2003, we've reported on this. And here's an example calculation. Let's say 185 people answer this question. Those that are reporting increase get +1. Those that are reporting a decrease is -1. We take the difference, divide that by the number of participants, and it gives us an index. So I'm going to show you a bunch of charts, and that's the index. So here's the first chart. And if you go back, you can see the number of proposal opportunities quarter over quarter actually dropped in 2008 during the recession, but since then it's been increasing steadily. So been a very good run since 2008. When you look at it geographically, this is our most recent, which is second quarter, you can see there's a lot of geographic difference. Surprisingly somewhat, the Rust Belt, the Midwest, the upper Midwest seems to be the one that's having the hottest proposal increases right now. And Canada is even more so. This shows how it works out on a market by market basis, looking at some of the major markets in the A&E industry. The top ones are mostly private sector. The bottom ones are mostly public sector, and the ones in the middle are a combination. And you can see there's not been a lot of change. Probably the biggest change is if you go to the commercial developer one, you can see that one has gone from slightly negative to slightly positive, which I think is really interesting because that's in spite of the fact that really we have not seen any significant decreases in interest rates yet. In spite of that, commercial development activity is increasing, I think, in anticipation of rate increases. We also look at a lot more detail. You can download the report. I'll show you in a minute how to get that report, and we cover all these different areas. So let's talk about the marketing challenges today, Jason.
So really interesting stuff there from Dave talking us through the AEC market landscape. Also really interesting to see the increase in proposal opportunities available in the AEC space today. I'm going to focus on AEC marketers for the next portion here, and then we can go do a Q&A at the end where you can ask questions on either one. But let's talk about the real challenges that lie ahead now for marketers and their attempts to win new business. In the next few slides, I'll dive into some key challenges faced by AEC marketers. These challenges aren't just hurdles, but they're areas where we can innovate and make a tangible difference in our firm's success and winning business. So let's dive in. After speaking with many members of our customer advisory board, we realized we had some major gaps in our understanding of the full breadth of the marketing responsibilities. So back in January, we started a large research project to gain a deeper understanding of our customers and the landscape AEC marketers navigate daily. So in short, we were trying to figure out what all our AEC marketers are spending their time on and what their biggest challenges are. And in the coming months, we'll be releasing a comprehensive report on it based on these survey results. But the survey captures insights from over 900 AEC marketers spanning entry level through seasoned executives across a broad spectrum of firm sizes within AE and ANSI. If you take a look at this graphic, what we're trying to do is lay out all the different responsibilities of an AEC marketer, from brand and pre-positioning to data management to organizational responsibilities and also importantly to that BD support. as Dave mentioned, loads of proposal opportunities. This matches up with our data as the majority of AEC marketers' time, up to 74%, depending on the size of the firm, really, is spent on supporting business development efforts. This includes everything from proposal creation, the interview prep, to producing revenue-generating bid-specific content. So this is really important because understanding how our time is allocated allows us to make informed decisions on where we can streamline processes, seek additional resources, or even push back when we need to. So as we dive deeper into the survey data, it's clear that many AEC marketers are being asked to do more with less. 73% of marketing teams have 10 or fewer members, and half of them just have 1 to 5 teammates on their team, regardless kind of company size. And it does span the spectrum there. So we're talking small teams in general, lots of teams of 5 or less. We also found that AEC marketers consider resource constraints to be their biggest challenge to their success in their job, followed by operational efficiency concerns that they may have. Also worth noting, again, that the majority of marketers believe their team's budgets are going to stay the same or even decrease this year. So working on a small team, they're going to be asked to do more proposals, and their feeling, at least, is we're not getting more budget on the marketing side. And this is really even starker when we look at targets. Only 1 in 4 marketers feel confident that they can meet the proposal targets given to them based on their current workload and resources. Now, this doesn't mean they necessarily have a target of, let's say, 100 proposals per year. Now, some firms do. But what this really means is whatever they're being asked, whatever that number is, only 1 in 4 think they have the resources to consistently deliver on that number. And so, like, if you really think about that, that's tough. The competition is fierce for these projects, and many firms are going for nearly every project they think they can potentially win. But 3/4 of the AEC marketers are not confident that they're going to be able to deliver those proposals, let alone make them compelling enough to win. And this underscores that immense pressure that we hear from AEC marketers. They're under the gun to deliver results despite these constraints. Now, going through and having these chats with Dave, he actually has some interesting data related to this as well. So, Dave, you wanna chime in here on go no go?
Yeah, there's an old saying: if a hawk chases 2 rabbits, he won't catch either one. And so selectivity, I think, is really, really important, especially when you're resource constrained, as people are today. Even if you're not resource constrained, it costs money to go after a whole bunch of proposals. And if you don't really have much of a chance of winning, it doesn't help. So we were pretty convinced that having a go, no-go process would really make a big difference. And those firms that have them would achieve much better results than those that didn't, because they would be much more selective in what they went after. And so we went out and we surveyed 100 A&E firms, and we found that it was about 60-40. About 60% of the firms that we surveyed had a formal go no-go process that was pretty rigorously followed, and about 40% they just sort of did it on gut feel. And we were pretty confident that 60% was going to definitely outperform the 40%. And so we had some folks back in our office crunch all the numbers, and this is what they came up with. We looked at 3 different metrics: overall proposal hit rate, and we saw, this is interesting. Firms with a formal process were about the same hit rate as firms that didn't have one. And then we looked at profitability, and we said, those aren't much different either. And then we looked at average revenue growth, and we said, wow, that's kind of the same too. And so this was such a surprise that I thought it was a mistake. In fact, I asked the person who crunched the data to send me the raw data because I was sure they'd made a mistake. But it was not a mistake. And so really it got us thinking about it. And we think that we are data driven. especially us engineers. We really think that we're data-driven. The architects, maybe not so much, but the engineers for sure. And we think that we're very rational and very data-driven, but in fact, we're not. In fact, we're human beings. And human beings tend to make decisions based on emotion first, and then justify those decisions or rationalize those decisions any way that's necessary. So what typically happens in firms that have a formal no-go process is they'll make the decisions. Whoever's filling out the form makes the decision first, and then they fill out the form to reflect that decision. Well, you may as well not even have a process, is what we found. So I think it's important to recognize that as human beings, we are subject to these kinds of emotional decisions. And to be data-driven means that you have to push that bias off to the side. And that's what I love about companies like OpenAsset, which really have the data to show you how to push that out.
Yeah, no, this is really, really interesting because our data backs it up. Basically, half of AEC marketers feel like they're going for everything, and half think they're kind of really being targeted to what they could win. And that kind of plays out in this data here. Whether they are being that targeted with a go, no-go process is an interesting one, but like their perception is basically 50-50.
Yeah, and I think it's really, this is, I'd say if there's one takeaway for me from this whole session here, it's that, it's not your scorecard if you're a marketer is not how many proposals you submit, it's how many jobs you win. And it's way better to win 3 out of 5 than to win 2 out of 10.
Yeah. Really, really good. Awesome. So moving on, let's talk about time. Let's look at some of the data that we have here on time and proposals. It's no wonder that getting the number of proposals out, hitting that whatever that target is, meeting those deadlines is an uphill battle when you consider how much time is spent on proposals, often without the efficiency that marketers would like. So marketers spend over half their time crafting proposals, dedicating on average 2 to 4 weeks to complete one. And again, these can vary in size, but that's about the average. And like as we discussed, half the companies are going almost for every project they can win right now. It's that competitive, and they're not always focusing on the personas or the one that they have the best shot at. What happens when time is spent inefficiently? We see that marketers are submitting proposals on the day of the deadline, often leaving little to no room for strategic revisions or last minute adjustments. Is it they're going to be the best quality? It's always under the gun. And I'll be honest on this one. I had to go back and check this stat as well, because I've shown this data to dozens of AEC executives, and they all ask who are the 37% who don't submit it on the last day. So it's clearly a time crunch there. I actually had one person say, that's just the nature of this business. It's always going to be like that. And kind of on the outside, where you're just like, wow, like, does it really have to be like that? But the data tells a clear story. Marketers are working really hard, maybe not always efficiently, and that's a real critical challenge that needs to be addressed.
So yeah, let me comment on that too, Jez, because I've known a number of firms that are part of that 36% that don't submit on the last day. And let me tell you, their hit rate is way, way better. I mean, unbelievably better. Because what they'll typically do is that they'll set an internal deadline of a week or two ahead of the due date, have a red team really critique it, then rework it based on the red team. And boy, the quality of that proposal, the second or third time around versus the first time around is like night and day.
Amazing. I believe it. So the 37%, right? All right, let's get into a bit on the data side of the proposals as well. Despite the significant amount of time spent on proposals, there's definitely a heavy reliance on boilerplate text. We see that. We also see that the smaller the marketing team, the more kind of boilerplate text and less customization at times. And it just feels like they may not have the time. They have such a small team that they don't have the time to really customize as much as they would like to and differentiate. Now, most AEC marketers believe that that boilerplate text is, about their industry, their services, their awards, whatever is common and it's needed and it helps tell the story, and they need to customize it a bit. And I'm not disagreeing with that, but you would hope that with so much reusable copy that you would save a lot of time, and by saving that time, the marketers could then focus on the tailored, compelling narratives that help them truly stand out. But for that to happen, that boilerplate text has to be at their fingertips and just be seamless. And all too often, that doesn't seem to be the case. Also, even with the reliance, and to be fair, the need for that boilerplate text, teams still find themselves writing proposals from scratch most of the time. So they're 83% of marketers are kind of starting all over. They're going to use different pieces, but they're going to start all over again in many ways. And this presents a significant inefficiency. So on one hand, we're using kind of the one size fits most approach and reusing that content. On the other hand, we're spending a lot of valuable time trying to find that text and then recreating proposals from the ground up. So this combination still means that we're spending less time on customization and time to stand out. And then this brings us to one of the biggest problems that we see in the survey. It's a data problem. Marketers have a huge data problem, starting from a blank slate with new proposals every time isn't because they prefer it. In a lot of ways, they feel like they're kind of forced down that path. Because why is that? Because the biggest challenges AEC marketers face is accessing and managing the data they need to create effective proposals. That was like the number one thing that they said. Finding, accessing, managing that data. It's not the thing that marketers like to do either. It's not kind of why they got into marketing, and it's a real struggle for them. So only 35% of marketers have a searchable, taggable database. But without this, every proposal becomes pretty manual, pulling content from various hard to find sources. If you're new to the marketing team, how are you going to know where that is? It's a struggle. Another big one is, and this is a huge one actually, and it's kind of told to us over and over again, and we've been doing even more kind of focused interviews on this side of it. 70% of marketers struggle to obtain content from the technical teams. So they get it to a certain point, and then they're just kind of like trying to get technical folks to either contribute, sign off, give an update, expand on it, especially on the engineering side. So this lack of access to critical information forces many to create it from scratch. And they're starting it all over again, and the technical teams are just being chased down all the time. So you're wasting loads of time. So that's a huge problem, is that marketer to technical team struggle. 62% of marketers say gathering and editing content is one of their top 3 frustrations. It's actually a bit of a shame, because when you actually talk to the AEC marketers, the content side of the job, the crafting compelling differentiators in the proposal, that's what they really like to do. They're, most AEC marketers that I talk to, they're super passionate about their company, about winning the jobs and projects. But the gathering and editing of the data and the text is super frustrating to them in their job and the proposal process. Another stat that jumps out, 38% of marketers are still using manual file management systems like Excel for text or Word documents for text. Lots of text is just in PDFs. Resumes are in Word. So they're not in a database. So this outdated approach leads to inconsistencies, makes it harder to find it, and then it's hard to leverage that content. All right. So those are some stats that hopefully kind of give a little bit of a picture of some of the struggles that are going on for AEC marketers. What we'll try to do is quickly go through, because we want to leave some time for questions. These are some challenges. How do we, how do we ensure moving forward that you are set up for growth and able to overcome these obstacles in your jobs. So first recommendation, for the AEC marketer out there is to get your house, get your data in order. Easier said than done. I totally get that. But we asked marketers, how do you ensure a culture of data integrity? The top responses were there has to be accountability amongst their teams, and there's various ways that they'll go about doing that. But that accountability and data accuracy is what they have to lean into as like part of their culture. Also, paired with that is clear data entry standards, guidelines. These are the rules. This is all how it's all mapped out. This is the expectation for you to succeed in helping us have data integrity. So you've got that project data, the employee data, the boilerplate text, your images, your videos, all the things that go into your proposals. You got to hold people responsible for the accuracy of the data and who's managing it, and have those clear guidelines. So you build that solid foundation. And if you're, because if your data isn't accurate and reliable, everything you build on top, it's not going to work out. So once you establish that foundation, the data integrity, we've got the next step is to streamline the data management to basically reduce human errors. That's another big pain point, is they get the process in place, but then either through manual data entry or a lack of accountability or lack of things being flagged up to them, there ends up being a lot of errors. So needing to streamline that process to minimize data entry, reduce likelihood of human error. Some of these things like integrations and things like that can help you maintain that data integrity, especially across multiple systems. Second recommendation for us, you have good data now. We've got that foundation. Make sure it's centralized and that people can access it. So you need to make people aware of the data, show them how to access the data, have processes for internal process for handling it and for handling requests for collateral. We hear over and over again that there's a lot of marketing teams that are not really tracking all the requests, or they don't have a great system in place to track all the requests that are out there from external teams. So you end up with untracked effort, bottlenecks, duplicated effort, and it slows down and creates inefficiency. So again, enabling people to work more independently, effectively, is going to be essential for you to kind of get past some of these initial hurdles so that you can get better proposals out and drive growth. Third one, we've got our data in a good spot. People are enabled. People understand the process. And then we go back to it. We feel like everybody's going for every, lots of people are going for every proposal, going after every project they think they could possibly win. You need to find ways for automation, streamline workflows. This is where you start to hear of folks coming in with kind of AI tools that are going to come help automate some of those common tasks. Anything that takes away some of those clunky steps in the process. Project management tools, we're seeing an increase in tools like Asana and things like that across marketing teams. So those types of things are really going to help in speeding you up, and that's going to give you your advantage. You're going to have an advantage to be able to dedicate more time into really creating compelling proposals. And then lastly on this one, and we've talked about it a bit, and again, maybe I'll leave this one for Dave to close out, because we've already been talking about it a bit. But when you decide to go for a project, and everybody's got a different approach on the go no go. Having that good data, maximizing your efficiency, giving yourself more time to differentiate, finding those ways to be strategic as you chase these opportunities. But anything else, Dave, from your side on this? You're chasing two rabbits, and
I think what you showed earlier about being resource constrained is very true. And if you're one of the 2/3 of the firms that routinely gets the proposal done the last day, you're chasing too many things. There's no question about it. And you're stretching your resources so thin that it's going to affect your hit rate. And so, you may have really great opportunities, but you're going to have to pick the greatest of the great, because not trying to get everything, you're going to lose more than you win.
Yep. Awesome. Finally, here's the OpenAsset plug. After you've taken that crucial step of ensuring data integrity, streamlining data management, removing bottlenecks, you can leverage technology that can further optimize your process. And this is where a DAM like OpenAsset can come in and to play. By implementing a DAM, you can centralize those assets, you make them more accessible, more organized for people, and it's very critical to that kind of proposal creation process. Speeding up the production, improving the quality of your proposals. Having a tool like this will kind of give you that opportunity moving forward. So yeah, that's the quick little plug there on OpenAsset. But with that, I want to turn it back over to our moderator, Derek, and we can take it from here, and also jump into some Q&A.
Absolutely. Jason, Dave, thank you both so much. A lot of really good information, a lot of good engagement from the audience. Again, we just kind of want to recap those recommendations that Jason and Dave just covered. I'm going to go through it pretty quickly. First, make the data integrity the foundation, and streamline that data management process. Second, ensure centralized team-wide access to data and the content. The third, make sure we're maximizing that efficiency and speed to boost the competitive advantage. And fourth, and potentially the most important is to be diligent, be strategic in choosing kind of which opportunities to chase. The old notion of quality over quantity. When you have that option. So yeah, those are the key takeaways, and then we'll go into just ways that you can kind of access some of the data and the information that we just talked about here shortly. So first things first, 3 ways to get the PSMJ quarterly market forecast that Dave mentioned. You can purchase those reports individually. You can become a member of PSMJ, or you can fulfill a survey and get free access to them. So I know my stance. I'll let you guys make your decision. Also note that we will send out these slides. Again, I know there were a few questions about that. The stats that Jason was mentioning are part of OpenAsset's AEC survey report. That is going to be coming out soon. So sign up here, scan this QR code. You'll be the first to receive it once it is live. And again, if you miss the QR code, we'll send it out so you have access to it. And lastly, Thrive. If you haven't already registered, or if you don't plan on or haven't planned on attending, please scan this code. Take a look at the agenda, the content, register, and take a deeper dive with Jason and Dave in person at PSMJ. I can personally speak from experience. Last year, it was a great conference in Salt Lake City, so would encourage the the audience to attend. All right, Q&A. Number of questions have come in. We've still got a few more. Please feel free to submit your questions in the Q&A module at the bottom of the Zoom screen. First question I'm gonna pose. I think this one might be suited for Jason. I am struggling to get started with just kind of this concept of data cleansing and have trouble convincing my team of its importance. Do you have any tips on the best place to start?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think one of the places to start is figuring out what the key data is that is in your most recent projects and bids, and some of the ones that you highlight the most, that's where we typically tell our new clients to start. Like, let's start with your top 20, 30, 50 most, marquee projects, the ones that you're kind of highlighting the most. And we can figure out a way from there to make sure that you've got that, that subset of data cleansed and into a good spot, whether you're putting that, at least into a spreadsheet, hopefully into a tool. You're able to then go ahead and like pick off the ones that you've finalized, and you want to get them somehow into a searchable, reusable format. So we typically start off there, like what are all those data points that go into those proposals, and what are all the things about those projects, about the employees that you're using resumes on, like, oh, what are all those different bits of content? And we just start there, like the most important, the most marquee ones. Start there, start small, and then make that usable for folks, so that you can start to see them seeing the value of it. But it definitely also has to be a bit of a top-down initiative. All the most successful folks that we've seen at this, it comes from the top. Also, if you have a culture of innovation, or especially integrations, and if you have like a vision on that side of the house for integrating your tools, that tends to be helpful as well. If you're not coming from any of those areas where you don't have top down, you don't have people envisioning integration work and those, then it's going to get really tricky. But those things help. And then also starting small, because it's going to take some time to get it into a good spot. But once you get it there, it definitely is going to be helpful for you.
What strategies do you have for convincing / ensuring new leadership team members to stick to proposal deadlines? I think more around kind of that project management and ways to kind of drive that home.
I'll jump in. I think what you have to do at the very, very beginning, when you first start planning out your proposal, you've got to plan it like a project, and you've got to schedule it. You've got to set milestones, and you've got to set a milestone to have a complete 100% done proposal 1 to 2 weeks ahead of the due date. And then you've got to set up a red review. It may be on a big project, it may be a red team review. On a small project, maybe it's just one person reviewing it. But if you don't have that process, your hit rate is going to drop dramatically. And so, I think the best thing you can do to convince people is to talk about the importance of doing that. Even if you do it on a trial basis, do it one time and just compare the quality of that proposal, the second or third draft versus the initial draft that would have gone in if you'd waited till the last day, and you'll see a dramatic difference.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even, some of our CAB members, and I'm sure loads of people out there are doing some of these things, but it's definitely about those milestones. They talk about it frequently, and there has to be some way to get the buy-in from the folks that marketing is dependent on in those steps as well. And so that's got to be really, really, really clear. But bringing some stats that, like Dave mentioned, on hit rate increasing the earlier you get kind of submit it, is also could be a compelling argument to get people on board with you.
I think those both are great points, and thanks for addressing that. Next question, a little bit more product specific. There was a question that came in. Jason, this might be a quick one as we're coming up against time. Try to get 2 more in. Does OpenAsset have any AI features included in the platform?
Yeah. So we've been on the journey for a couple of years on the AI side. So we currently have image similarity, which helps with keyword tagging. We've got suggested keywords. So again, these are things that try to help you search faster. We've got a content assist, which helps with bios and project description creation. We just released an AI facial recognition tool that saves time in finding and managing employee photos, headshots, things like that. Also working right now on a Gen AI model that the marketer would then be able to use, that kind of would bubble up some important data what's in OpenAsset about your projects, your proposals, the content that you have in there, to make better workflows for you. So we're definitely on that journey. We've got a number of things already out, and we've got more coming for sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Jason. A lot of questions coming in. Feel free to add more as it relates to the go, no-go process. This one I'll throw out to our speakers. How do you ensure that decisions aren't made on emotion, even with a formal process, or even with a formal process, it is hard to say no sometimes. Saying no, it's tough. It's tough.
Saying no is the hardest, especially when you think you can win. But right now, especially, there's so many good opportunities. My suggestion is if you have 5 or 6 opportunities and you only have time to respond appropriately, you can respond to all of them, but respond appropriately to maybe only 2 or 3 of those. I would go force ranking and just say, instead of the go no thing just doesn't work. But a force ranking does, and say, all right, let's everybody who's in the decision process, let's take these 5 or 6 or whatever number are on the table, and let's rank them from top to bottom, and let's then decide, okay, how deep can we go, and submit a winning proposal, not just submit a proposal, submit a winning proposal.
I think it's a tough one as well. I think it's going to be hard to convince, certain leadership, depending on how things are going with the firm, like, constraints and how competitive things are, and like how you've been doing over the last year or two, to say we're not going to go for this one. I totally feel you on that one, but I think Dave's got good points there.
Awesome. We're right up against time here. I'm not sure. Let's see. One more quick one. I am using Uninet for our CRM and ERP. How would an integration there work and help streamline some of these processes? Jason, that's probably one for you. Just real quick, because we're at time.
Right. So integration with OpenAsset from Uninet. Yep. So you can connect projects and employees from Uninet to OpenAsset. So it's kind of the data flow is Uninet into OpenAsset. You can also have a flow of images back from OpenAsset into Uninet as well, if you're using their document creation tools. So it pushes that data into OpenAsset. Means you don't have to manage it in OpenAsset. You just manage it in Uninet. It can be used to help you with searching. You got a really visual way of seeing those, bios and project descriptions, all those things. But that's the way the integration works. Uninet text into OpenAsset, images back into Uninet.
Awesome. Thank you, Jason. Dave, thank you both for your time. Some really compelling insights. As always, I learned something by joining and moderating these things. And to the audience, really appreciate you spending an hour out of your day. And again, we will send a recording. We will send the slides over, and check out those reports to learn more details. And if we didn't get to your question, we'll do our best to follow up and respond to it via email. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave.